All right. So welcome everybody. Andrew Morgan here with the folks from SaaS Alerts. Thanks for joining us as always. We got a very cool SaaSy call today. What we are going to do is first get a quick product update from Liron. We're then going to move to Michelle, get a marketing update. Then she's going to throw up a poll. And then I'm going to be joined by the very awesome Ben Jones. And we're going to do another tabletop. Now, this one is actually one that Ben has lived through. He provided some fantastic screenshots. We've got a PowerPoint. And so, again, we'll need you to make it fun and enjoyable and worthwhile. So we'll do it step by step, and hopefully you guys engage and give feedback so we can kind of see where the adventure goes. That's what a tabletop should be, right? Based on giving you information and what you might do and how you might respond. So it's a great way to learn and then see what gaps you might have or what things you might have done differently based on the answer you gave. All right. So with that, Liron, let you take on over.
Thanks, Andrew. So no major updates today. We're continuing to work on the two big features that we plan to deliver this year. Some less epic features. That's what we call the really big ones. Impossible travel is one that we're working on, plus some enhancements to how we customize approved locations. But in the meantime, I just want to encourage everybody to make sure that you enable the respond rule that aggregates MFA failures, since that's a very strong indicator of an account compromise, something that we've talked about and something that I want to make sure that we keep encouraging you guys to do.
Very cool. Anything else, Ron? And
no, that's it. Just working on big features, which unfortunately take quite a bit of time to work through. So nothing major to announce.
Yeah, very, very cool. I can't be excited to. I think everybody's excited to see what you guys are going to be releasing in a few months. Big things coming, and big value to everybody. Chip, anything you want to add or comment on?
No, I think we're good. I'm excited to get into this tabletop and give us as much time as we can with it. We kind of almost ran over with last week's. Well, we did run over, and people were ducking out, and I was late for a call. So let's get it rolling.
Okay, perfect. So, yeah, absolutely. All right. So then, Michelle, before we put up a poll, give us a little bit of an update on what's happening in the world of marketing.
Sure. We've got a lot of great things going on, but I'm not going to inundate you today. So I'll just give you the top three. We do have a webinar coming up on May. This is May, right? May 23rd. And it's going to be moderated by Andrew. So, it's going to be awesome. But it's going to be centered around the sales process and the fact that, clients have zero tolerance for no value sales reps. So John Barrows from Sell Better is going to be hosting it, but it's going to be panel form, correct?
Correct.
Jim will be a panelist, as well as Charles, is it Tomeo from Ruth?
Charles Tomeo.
Yeah. So I am going to drop that link right into the chat for you. And like I said, it's May 23rd at 1 p.m. So I hope to see you there. Next up, we have just a reminder, the Cool Rules Challenge. If you have not submitted yet, please do so. You could win up to $4,000. So it's kind of a big deal. I'm going to drop that in too. And I mean, in addition to winning money, which is awesome, you're also going to help us build out our template library, which is only going to help you, only going to help your other MSPs. So do it. And just the deadline is May 31st. I will bug you again about it. And then next week we have for events, Alex and Ryan will be at Seven Figure Live in Nashville at the Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville Hotel. So if you are going to be there, stop by and say hi. If you would like to attend, we have a promo code where you can get 90% off using SaaS Alerts code. So let me know if you want it, and I'll send it to you. And that's all we have for today.
Very cool, Michelle. A lot going on. Yeah, just real quick context on that webinar. It's really interesting. If I could just 2 minutes provide some thoughts on this. So one, again, John Barros, if you don't know who he was the original CRO of Thrive, Jim's MSP. So this is a gentleman now over the past probably 12 years who really has built an incredible sales training company. If there is a major SaaS provider, he's probably trained or their trainer. So you're thinking Salesforce, LinkedIn, Box, Dropbox, those types of companies. He is their trainer. He also does train MSPs still in his platform. Obviously with those bigger companies, he's probably doing some more hands-on and, in-person things, but for MSPs, he does have, velocity type training and things of that nature. What's interesting about the backdrop of, again, forgive the air quotes here and buzzword, but AI, Chip, and I'd love your feedback at when I make this comment in a minute and your input. So if you look at Gartner studies and you look at studies on how people buy today, because of the internet, the way people buy has changed. Even your customers, they estimate anywhere between 65 to 70% of the buying process is done before somebody ever reaches you because of the proliferation of information. It's increasing every year. And so if you think about that, is buyers want a frictionless experience. It's also telling us by and large, they're viewing what we do in our role when we put our sales hat on, right? Because we all still have to sell. If you're an MSP, you have to sell your services. Buyers are viewing your value or our value, any sales rep's value, less and less and less. The interesting part about Gartner's study most recently is of the people that just went completely frictionless and didn't ever interact with a salesperson, they did have a higher regret rate by not interacting. So their point is there is still value that we can behold to differentiate, to be that challenger sales that we've done some training on and help people understand why we can help solve their problems. But now back to the world of AI. If you think about what AI can do today, it can really replace a huge portion of what a sales rep does. And if you have sales reps, think about it. How many of them just send out templated emails? How many of them pick up the phone and say, hey, just wanted to check in and see how things are going? Well, not only can AI do that, but it can do it better. It can do it more articulately, right? I'm not saying the phone call, although we do know that it can do voice, those types of things. But in terms of the communication, in terms of tracking, for example, Chip's interested in this type of thing, I can send Chip very curated information based on just understanding through Zoom info and other things, what really means something to Chip. And I could send him curated content automatically. And so this is really what we're going to be talking about is the evolution and where is sales, the role of sales heading. And I think it's really relevant and really important, not only for your MSP to understand, but then for you to then add value to your customers because they're going to be struggling with this too. Chip, thoughts on kind of that genre there? I probably went a little more than 2 minutes.
Well, a couple thoughts. Certainly AI is going to be replacing a lot of the lead generation, the initial interest of customers in technology purchases. There's no doubt about that. I think for MSPs that there's actually an opportunity to put the sales team, the sales experts to a higher value by letting AI take those components over and becoming solution selling experts. For a long time, I've been of the belief that a technology sale is really a business consulting sale. And especially when people are looking at spending money that they didn't otherwise budget for or know they need to spend, and security definitely falls into that category because it's always changing. We're walking in and telling them they need these new things. What about the stuff you sold me 3 years ago? Well, okay, well, that's still needed, but now there's new stuff that's necessary. The human touch is still essential in that. And you talked about the regret profile, Andrew, of people, clicking through. There's, software sites out there. I'm sure everybody's heard them advertised on the radio. You can go to this site and type in what kind of software you're looking for, and they're going to give you a comparison. You can sit there reading for 2 hours on comparisons from this product to the next. And you really don't know if you're making the right decision. So the consulting aspect of what the MSP does, I think, is still so critical, not only to their business, but to their customer success, on the technology journey. That, I think AI enables them to focus on that piece of it and leave the mechanics to the AI.
Yeah, really well said. It's a lot of it is really what RMM, if you think about it, did for MSPs, right? If you think about it, RMM the initial like gut feel back in 2005, and I remember it in like it was yesterday, when Kaseya and Enable, well, it was as early as 2003. A little trivia for you out there. Does anybody know what Enable's first name was in 2003? That's how old I am, Chip, in this industry. Let's see if anybody answers that correctly. But what's interesting is people thought, wow, it's going to replace my job, but it really allowed the MSP to elevate the value instead of people patching, or updating. It allowed them to, if we look at, per seat prices, they've dramatically increased through automation of RMM over the years. So
it also changed the MSP business model, Andrew. I mean, completely. Back then, most MSPs were still, they were billing for blocks of time, right? Yep. And the block of time model was around, okay, so many times a week or a month, or a month or a quarter, we're going to send a couple of guys over to your business, or one guy, depending upon the size, to update your software on your an accounting system installed, update that, go through your hardware, make sure everything's okay. It was all a very hands-on approach, and it was all based on this block time billing thing. RMM comes along, and now all of a sudden we can do most of this remotely, and people start realizing, wait a minute, I don't have to resell this. I'm in there. Why don't I charge a subscription fee for this? And thus, the MRR ARR model is born from that transition.
Yep, very true. Last thing I'll say is that you said, and then we'll get to the tabletop, and I used this from this very call this morning. I was on another conversation, and I don't know if the gentleman's on, but there was an MSP, SaaS call MSP, who said, I finally got 2 of my customers, they were marketing advertising customers, to buy my security stack. And it wasn't because of anything that changed between the MSP and the customer, Chip. It was the fact that the advertising company had their largest customer, one of their largest customer, who was getting audited, who had the auditor say, okay, let's talk about your service providers and their security controls. Well, why did the advertising company all of a sudden want to spend all the security money with the MSP? Well, there was risk to revenue. If you don't do this, you're losing your contract. And so, to your point, Chip, people find money really fast if we understand how they make money and what the risk to their revenue is. And that's, I think, the really important part, again, coming back to what you said, is being that consultant and trying to find out how we can really add value in that sales conversation.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I have a similar personal story. That was the beginning of my journey down SOC 2, which was then SSAE 16. It was a different audit standard, but also AICPA that put it out. But we did it because our largest customer went public, and their auditors came in and said, every service provider out there has got to have an AICPA SSAE 16. So that's what started, my journey back when I was an SSP down that road. Cause I'm like, okay, this is going to cost us, 30 grand to get it done. But if we don't do it, we're going to lose 200 grand in revenue. It's
so funny you say that. I promised last time. It's one of my favorite MSP stories ever. It's Sean Brown from SnapTech. Had a public company and very similar genre story. Got a call and said, hey, we just need your information on your SOC 2. And Sean literally, this is, going back 12 years ago. He's like, yeah, Googling SOC 2
On the call.
And hence, but it's interesting because they're an MSP that's been SOC 2 probably longer than most, years and years and years now. And their per seat price is dramatically higher. Their security acumen is higher than most. But it's, to your point, they were going to lose a public company that was like, it was a crazy amount of MRR to them. All of a sudden, they were SOC 2 pretty quick and spent a lot of money getting there.
Yep.
Anyway, all right, Ben, let's do it. Let me share out my screen here. And this is going to be fun. Let's see. All right. Tell me if you guys can see me okay.
We got you.
And I'll just go to play from current slide. All right. So Ben, one of your clients, and this is something you actually have lived through, gives you a holler and has one of those bad feelings. Because of an email they got last week. We're obviously changing some names around and a little bit of the story for anonymity's sake. Jim, let's say, gives you a call, Ben, and has a bad feeling. He sends you over this. Talk to us a little bit about what this was like, Ben, and maybe a question or two you'd like to ask the MSPs out there.
Jane Doe, as you can tell, it's probably not her name, sent an email to Kathy, which is the head of accounting and human resources, with just this email. And as you see, it was close to the end of the day. I believe it was a Friday, and requested that her next paycheck be sent to a different account, and was looking for confirmation of this email before giving the ACH information. In this example, that was kind of suspicious. This was a little bit before ChatGPT, so some of the grammar is not great. And so they thought it was a little funny, so they decided to give us a call and find out, kind of what the next steps would be.
And Ben, just to point out here in the email of social engineering, we do have a time. I think it's really important because if you're going to do these as tabletops, which again, we hope I hope this isn't just like entertainment for you, although it is entertaining. I hope, and I think Ben's hope and all of our hope here at SaaS Alerts, the community, is that you start doing these not only internally, but as services and as a means to better engagement and value with your customers. So that been part of, maybe talk to us about, educating your client here. There's a timeliness component, right? A sense of urgency. And that is often a big part of social engineering. You want to kind of just maybe give your take on timeliness or sense of urgency, whether it's the boss needs, the boss is stuck and needs gift cards, whatever it is, and why people fall for it.
I've got a couple of those. So with this email, it's mostly, I need your prompt assistance, and so you get your urgency there. They don't really have, authority in this. This was just, a front desk employee. We didn't really have the authority to, make this change immediately. Whereas some of you guys might have gotten these text messages. This is so-and-so, which happens to be the CEO. I'm in a meeting and I need you to give me these gift cards right away. I need you to go to the store. I need you to pick them up for me and send me the codes. So in that example, that's more authority and urgency. But either one works, and they don't always have to be tied together.
Yeah, really good point. And by the way, last thing I'll say here, Ben, is interesting, at least in the Verizon data breach report, if you take a look at industries that fall for phishing, does anybody want to guess which one falls way up at the top? Michelle, maybe you can tell me what people are saying in chat because I can't see. Does anyone want to guess?
No guesses yet.
No guesses? Well, I will tell you, since no one is participating, it's our field. And why? Because we want to respond and take care of our customers. Technology is one of the top verticals to fall for phishing, ironically.
We are the gatekeepers.
Yep. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Ben, so policy. Talk to us about this conversation.
Yeah. So we've had the discussion with the MSP. With MSP's had the discussion with the client about, bank fraud and business email compromise, what to look for. And that's what prompted this particular client to reach out to the MSP. They've been taught that it's not bugging your IT guy. It's actually like very important. And we would prefer that they called or emailed us before making any decisions. So I guess my question to you guys would be, what would you do in this situation if, your customer has called you and sent you this example email? And I'm going to fast forward a little bit, and you've looked at the headers. There's some people that might say that, and you see that it appears to be from that actual Jane Doe.
Yeah, and please feel free to chime in. And by the way, I'd love to hear, again, you can come off mic or put it in chat, Michelle, if you could be my eyes. But do you guys, have companies push back and go, we don't need to put in a policy to call, if we get that information, we're going to make a phone call first, right? Does every one of your clients have one of those types of policies in place? I was telling Ben a story where, it happened at a company I actually know that actually had the policy in place, but it was late in the Friday afternoon. The email looked legitimate. It was legitimate email because it was spearfish, Ben. And they didn't check. And that was $75,000 later that quote unquote supplier got paid. So anything up there, Michelle?
Yeah, Joshua is saying, ask the user if they sent it. If they did not, reset password, log out of all sessions, then check for rules and audit recently accessed files in OneDrive, SharePoint to see what all they may have viewed while the bad actor was logged in. So that's a recommendation, I think.
That's a great recommendation.
And to your phone call policy, Andrew, internally, we have a phone call policy. Pick up the phone and call them. I mean, and I'll tell you that my couple of customers that have had their clients get BEC'd, they've got policies in place now. We had one last year to the tune of $150,000, and it was their own accounting firm. So
good stuff, Jace. Jason, do you ever get pushback though, brother? Like from on things, policies like that? Now I know you deal with a lot of community banks and bigger companies.
We do, and it's actually amazing at the level that we get the pushback from on one side, and then the other side it's not that amazing. And when we do start getting pushback, we're pivoting a little bit. We having pushback on MFA enablement for some of the C-levels at a community organization right now that deals with a lot of governmental and health health information. And we basically we had our lawyers draw up a form that said, look, you're refusing to do this. If this happens, or we can attribute this to this happening, it's on you. We're not liable. And how far that'll go,
I'm curious, in an organization like that, do they have cyber insurance?
They do, and we've, in spite of saying that, look, your cyber insurance is requiring this as part of their policy, they're still pushing back. And no offense to some of us old fogies on the call, but the staff that we're getting the most pushback are borderline Luddites, for lack of better terms. I mean, they don't understand technology. They don't understand how easy it is to have these things happen in an instant. So that's typically where the pushback is coming from, is lack of understanding or lack of being willing to understand.
I know this is a pie in the sky idea, but wouldn't it be great if you could tie personal accountability to it? Like, okay, if you wire 60,000 out, you're responsible for the 60 grand.
Oh, I'd love that. If you start pulling from someone's pocketbook, they'll pay attention real quick.
Yeah, of course. Of course. All right, good stuff. Any other comments on policy or things that people are doing? And then Ben, did you want to comment at all on Joshua's recommendations thus far?
I think that's great. What he has suggested is perfect, which is very similar, as you'll see in the next slide. It's kind of what we recommend as well. Before SaaS alerts, we relied heavily on these logs, and we also relied heavily on the customer speaking up, because a lot of these logs don't last longer than 30 days. So we can lose this information pretty quickly. What you'll see in this one, as we did log in and start examining the logs. And what you may not see here, these are all the IP addresses that were normal, but the ones towards the bottom were actually showing from, I believe, Russia.
Do you want me to go get that and show it, Ben? I can
Sure.
pull it up. Yeah,
That would be great.
Why don't you keep talking, and I'll pull that up real quick for everybody.
That's good. So in the spirit of participation, you do log in, and you see that there is a suspicious login attempts from another country. What do you think what would your next steps be besides that? You have evidence they've been in there, and like Joshua said, let's start looking at logs. You've shut the customer's access down. How do you think they got in there? Do you guys have any ideas?
We getting any
Spoil it for you.
Everyone's
Well,
really quiet today.
I know it's just one of those days. Well, my first reaction was, oh my gosh, they didn't have MFA turned on. They got brute forced. Some hacker went out and downloaded their credentials, or got them off the dark web or something, and that's how they got in. And it's pretty obvious. Come to find out, they did have MFA turned on, and it was through an authenticator app. So then I'm really scratching my head. I'm saying, what's happened? How are, I thought MFA was the best. You can't get around MFA, right? And this was kind of about the same time that we realized that it wasn't the end all be all that everybody hopes it is. And as you can see, this is the log, the actual log. And while it's not the client's IP address, that is the actual IP address of our little bad actor. I didn't see a reason to obfuscate that. So you can see that they used Exchange Online to log in, and then use the Office 365 shell. So what we did notice, and you might have a log as well for this as well, Andrew, but when you look at the authentication method, and I think that might actually be a little bit farther over, you'll see that get your browser right there. Yeah. And so the MFA requirements was satisfied by the claim in the token. If you see that, they basically, it tells you right there kind of how they got in. Has anybody ever heard of how the hacker actually was able to accomplish this? Looking at you, Joshua, you're the only one talking, so this is a me and you conversation.
Can you come off mute, Joshua? I'd love to hear you if you can.
Okay, if you're shy.
Oh, no, I had to find the unmute button on there.
Awesome. Thanks, Joshua, for participating. Talk to us, bud.
Hey, not a problem. No, looking at it, my if I was guessing, I'd assume it was probably just MFA fatigue, where the user just blindly got the Microsoft approve button and hit it without paying attention.
Could be that. That's pretty common. And that was just around that same time when that was starting to become pretty popular. In this instance, it very well could be that. We were mostly thinking that it also could be the work of token harvesting through an evil proxy. And that's something that was pretty new around that time as well. And I believe we have a slide for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to go to it real quick so you guys, yeah, Ben, this is pretty interesting. And Chip, have you seen this? And before Ben goes in, have you kind of seen how this works?
Oh yeah, we're very familiar with this. We've seen a number of these in the SaaS alerts community. You know, this is one of those things that worries me. Back to your point about AI, Andrew, is that phishing emails with a link for someone to click on in the email, as you said earlier, used to be very easy to spot because the grammar is often terrible. And I expect they're going to get better and people are going to get fooled more often. So I think I expect to see more and more of this as time goes on.
We had just real quick, Ben, I'd love your comment and yours as well, or anybody's, but let me start with you, Chip and Ben. We had a really good guy on this past week on the cyber call, Jason Schiffer, who used to be with Mandiant, but they are working on, they do a browser plugin, and there's other technologies like this, but it's really fascinating that if a URL is executed, it's basically sandboxed for a period of time. It immediately looks at obviously a bunch of different things. Are we going to need to see more of those types of kind of traffic cops because of this?
If that's a question to me, I think absolutely. I think something else that can help is if Microsoft and Google, and I'm aware that there are already some third-party tools out there, but I think when emails are coming into a domain from outside an organization and they're containing links for people to select, and we all know now, you don't have to change applications. You just click the link in Outlook or wherever you happen to be in, it opens your browser and away you go. Of course, it's going to open your default browser, and your default browser is what's going to be logged into Office 365 with. So there's your token. Backsourcing those links, all of us security folks, I think we've learned to look at those links sort of askew, or at least I do. I'll mouse over them. I'll see where even though it says, log into, I don't know, come up with your favorite tool to Spotify.com to change your password. We think somebody might have hacked you. You mouse over that link and you see that it's going to some random URL that starts off with Spotify and ends with, BillyBob'sHackingFarm.com. That kind of stuff could be picked up by providers inbound, and I don't think it is enough. We have some of it. Nice, Josh. We've got some of it, but I don't think it's as effective as it needs to be. It needs to really become bulletproof.
Good stuff.
I agree. I mean, in this example, it's basically just a man in the middle attack. I mean, I guess Microsoft, with their infinite power, I would think should be able to recognize when traffic is coming from, an IP address that is nowhere geographically, typically where they log in from. The problem is, what do they do about it? I mean, they throw an MFA prompt, but that's what the hacker wants. So,
yeah, really good. Really cool. Anything you want to walk through here on, or Joshua, have you seen this evil proxy? Jason, are you privy to this kind of how this works?
We had a recent incident that may have been attributed to evil proxy. We weren't, they have a basic Azure AD presence, no advanced logging or anything like that. And SaaS alerts isn't turned on next, but we have a standard procedure when we see a BEC compromise. That's obviously BEC compromise. All the tokens get revoked, all their MFA authentication stuff gets reset, re-authenticated, passwords are changed, so on and so forth. We have it templated in our PSA. this particular attack, you know, could have been an evil proxy. We're not 100% positive. We've definitely seen MFA fatigue attacks come across. And those are always fun because they're like, oh, we just clicked on it because we were tired of getting the alert. And I'm like, would you let the guy in your house because you're tired of him knocking on the door?
Yep.
So
That's true. That's very true.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, we've seen other than this one, what was really popular was the client would get just like a link to a SharePoint site that said, you know, please check out this documentation. We had one that was an accountant that actually got it from one of their clients and then opened it, and then the accountant's email was I'm not going to say breached, but because that wasn't really the purpose. The purpose was just to gather credentials and gather tokens, but send it out to all of their clients as well. So it was very sneaky, and all it was just a link to a SharePoint site, and it was a legitimate SharePoint site that was just set up temporarily just to serve that purpose.
Yeah, really, really phenomenal stuff that you guys did there, Ben, to kind of investigate this. All right, but where should we go next? I can go back here. We looked at this.
Saw that the MFA was set up, and so it's, you know, we can't blame brute force attacks. You know, the customer did listen to the MSP and have an MFA enabled. So it really came down to, you know, for this particular company, doing kind of like what Joshua said, you know, revoke, reset passwords. And there was one other piece of that puzzle that that the client really learned, and that was really pay attention to the user education. I think there's always going to be technology that will get around whatever we put in place, but it's really about educating your people, clients and employees.
Good stuff. Should we go to the interactive sign-ins, or is that still relevant? And if so, I can bring up the actual.
I know that's basically the logs that we downloaded. It was kind of what Joshua said. Just basically get as much logs as you possibly can,
Okay.
Before they're removed.
Perfect. We looked at this, I think.
Yeah, we saw that that was basically signed in because they already had a token to bypass the MFA.
And then.
Oh yes.
Yeah, talk to us about this.
Yes. So as you guys may have seen by this slide, what's the number one thing that hackers typically end up doing when they get into an account? Any guesses?
Anyone?
It's right on there. So yeah, rules. They did set up rules to catch any information that went back as a response from the bookkeeper. Yes, the infamous forwarding rules. Yes. Do you guys have any other as far as experience besides rules that you have seen that bad actors could do once they do gain access to an account? If not, I can always tell you what I've seen.
And Ben, what a great kind of maybe it would be interesting if any of you guys have co-managed accounts. It would be a great collaborative tabletop, or almost like testing security controls. Like, hey, we went in and set up forwarding rules, you guys didn't catch it, right? So, like maybe get like, hey, do you guys mind us, working with you on testing security controls? Let's just say you've got a good relationship with your co-managed customers. I think it'd be a great, test. Ben, what do you think? Again, if you have that kind of good relationship with a co-managed company, like go in and flip on forwarding rules in their O365 and see if their detective controls are catching it.
Yep. I'm going to pick on Josh again. Have you ever experienced something like this and saw anything besides rules?
Now, most of what I've seen has all been inside the rules. Whether it's, moving it to like the RSS feeds, conversation, or drafts seems to be the top three popular ones.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Ryan? You always got some good stuff. It's good to see you there. Kind of, you're almost like in the cloaked hoodie back there, bud. All in. Yeah, you got any good stuff for us, my friend? And is it warming up where you are? Usually in a, Parker.
It's doing fine. I mean, we typically see the mail forwarding rules happen often, and that seems to be the easiest red flag to catch it on. The RSS feed is the one that we see the most. It used to be that they would delete it, and now that they're trying to kind of hide. It's become relatively easy to create rules for if you delete mail automatically, because that doesn't happen too often. And now it's become more of like, okay, what shell is it under? And so they kind of just choose different shells to hide it under each time now. I will say the one different thing that I've seen was a particular client had some advanced Microsoft licensing in place. And in addition to the forwarding rules, we got mass download alerts from OneDrive and the internal SharePoint sites. And it wasn't because it was triggered from, a non-standard geolocation. It was because they downloaded more than they have before. And that triggered a DLP policy, which in turn triggered their, this is a co-managed location, triggered their internal IT guy to go, oh, that's kind of odd, what's going on? And then go through the logs, right? Which in turn we found out, in this particular case, I believe it was again an MFA exhaustion attack.
Jace, for someone that might not have E5, it sounds like that's what was in place. Could you maybe do some type of canary or, deception where you stuff a OneDrive document with a certain size file that,
I think there's some rules around, even in basic licensing, that you can turn on around mass downloads and stuff like that. The initial threshold is actually kind of low. I think it's like 20 files at once.
Okay.
But the way Microsoft licensing works, you could probably get away with assigning one E5 license and turning the feature off across the tenant. It's odd the way it works sometimes. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't know, and I haven't dug into SaaS alerts to see. I do know that our SaaS alerts instance triggers off the DLP rules that we have in place, which is helpful because trying to, decipher a Microsoft email is super fun most days.
Yeah, we have independent file activity alerts, Jason, and I'm so glad you brought this up because I was seconds away from chiming in, which I told Andrew I was going to try and keep my mouth shut during the tabletop. But one of the things that I think that there's a danger in the fact that our whole community always calls these business email compromises, because we focus on the fact that it starts with an email account and starts with Exchange. But don't forget that once this person's in, they've now got access to everything in the O365 universe. And what we see a lot of is file activity, extra downloads, extra file modifications, like just opening files, but also SharePoint sharing. It's like all of these things can trip up, and SaaS Alerts has independent rules, whatever, regardless of the licensing level in Microsoft. When you set either at the global level for an organization or down to individual users, you can set different file activity thresholds, and SaaS Alerts will throw alerts for downloads, uploads, deletes, and sharing if they go over that threshold. The other thing that the sophisticated actor is going to do is they're going to jump into teams and they're going to ask to join groups. And by joining groups, get access to more data and ask for privileges to see other areas in SharePoint that they may not have otherwise had access to. So, and a lot of this depends upon how long the bad actor goes undiscovered. Their goal is to kind of be sneaky and act like they're your colleague. That's the whole deal here. They want to impersonate somebody else. That's why this is a spear phishing attack. They're gonna impersonate themselves and ingratiate themselves to other members of the organization to try and traverse where they can. So that, that's, to me, it's always important to remember, this isn't just a business email compromise. This is a Office 365 account compromise. It doesn't matter how it starts. It does start with email, but it's really the whole product.
Well, and I definitely gotta agree with that, because if the attacker is smart, what's the average dwell time on internal infrastructure systems and stuff like that? Imagine if you got compromised and they got your contract base, your company base, your client information and stuff like that, figured out who your competitors were, and then went and came back and said, well, hey, I got your entire competitor list and all your bids and how you do your work. I'm gonna go sell it to them unless you pay me X. I mean, stuff along those lines. So,
Yep.
never
So
mind the HR violations and all the other crime data sitting around out there.
I've got something that we've been kind of mulling over and trying to play with and figure out if it's going to be something useful or not, which is taking, the communication chain for finance and making a shared mailbox for that communication, so that all communication only goes to that shared mailbox instead of directly with any user. And then requiring internally, we are trying to make a requirement that in order to get access to that mailbox, that you have MFA enabled and the persistent browser session set turned on. So that way, if the user is essentially compromised, they don't necessarily get to see the entire communication chain. They have to access the shared mailbox, and then we block sign in on the shared mailbox so that you can't log in it directly, so that you can really kind of see the conversation. And what we've played around with this so far, it's not perfect, but what we've seen so far is that having multiple people in that shared mailbox seeing it, it's multiple eyes on the same thing, and it's more likely for them to catch there's something strange here, rather than it just being on one person's account and one person looking at it.
Yeah, I haven't done anything as extensive as that, so much as I've set up, say, for our accounts receivable and payable guys, there's an O365 group tied to that multiple people see. And unfortunately, I've instilled a level of paranoia with my accounting folks where it's actually a little bit annoying, but I'll take it over sitting out wired money someplace that isn't a valid vendor.
Yeah, one of the things we were thinking about doing is like trying to kind of allow the user to keep a contact list in that shared mailbox that would categorize email to just say that if it's in their contact list, it would just say, verified contact, basically. So there's kind of a secondary method that like, hey, this is a contact you frequently talk with for that vendor, that you have a little bit more confidence that this is the person you're supposed to be talking to in that kind of conversation, rather than like if someone else jumps in and it's a new contact, you didn't know anything about them, even if they're covering them, you need to kind of have extra scrutiny towards.
Yeah, and there's several products out there that I've seen, and I know Microsoft is leveraging some AI to do this. There's a couple of them out there that do it that we use in our stack, that kind of sit in that Office 365 tenant and watch that and behave, do some behavioral analysis. Hey, my CEO typically doesn't send these types of emails to this person, and it raises an alert, raises a flag, creates a ticket for us to investigate that, and quarantines that message before it goes really anywhere, both inbound and outbound.
Really good stuff.
Yeah. Well, I would just say that, at this time, when we experienced this, we were fortunate. We had, SaaS alerts enabled, set up, where Respond was enabled. And then when they did log in from that location, once SaaS alerts saw it, kicked everything out. With this, one of the main reasons we went with SaaS alerts is because would you have caught this if that HR person hadn't said anything? If they had said, "Oh well, it's probably normal."
Right. Really, really interesting. Do we want to do anything with rule number 2 here?
You can show rule number 2. Yeah, that's basically just kind of a little bit more of the same. It's just looking out for that response to make sure that that person, when they did respond, the bad actor was able to see it. One thing that I will bring up that we have seen in the past is not only rules, but sometimes the bad actor will actually change parts of the signature in their email. If there's a link that goes to their email or the website, they'll modify that link to go to a malicious site, not allow people think to check for signatures.
Chip, have you guys thought about any, I mean, it's, I brought up deception before, but whether it's, size of downloads or, where you might put in, hey, this is the password.xls. Is there use cases for what SaaS alerts could do around that?
Oh yeah, so absolutely. So when we released Respond V2, the second half of the Respond release, we included, excuse me, V3, we included the ability to search for keywords in the description of the event. So now, for those of you who are familiar with Respond, you can set up your regular conditions like you always have. You can also add a filter. There's a little filter button on the side of the conditions section, and you were basically setting up a where statement that says where description or description details has these elements, and you can definitely include a file name. In fact, there's some rules out there that we've seen in the environment that people have set up that look for keywords like salary or CEO or really anything that's in that file name. Again, we don't look at the message body, we don't look at the document body, but we do report what that file name is. So, if you want to make sure that, payroll.xls, never gets shared anywhere, you can absolutely set up a rule for that in SaaS alerts that at the very least it will alert you. And of course you can take actions against the account if you choose to. I don't want to, I want to go back to Ryan for a second and his comment about shared mailboxes. Number one, I think that's a great strategy. Number two, he said the key phrase, which was when setting up a shared mailbox, make sure you block sign in. By Microsoft's design, those mailbox accounts, those shared mailbox accounts are only meant to be connected to by the people who are on the authorized list that it's shared from, and only through either the Outlook web client or the regular Outlook client, where you go into your settings and you say, connect to another mailbox, and you have authorization to get that. That's the proper way to use shared mailboxes. And we see, or group mailboxes, we see a lot of, what's the right word? We see a lot of non-compliance with that event, with that processing or that configuration of shared mailboxes, of group mailboxes.
Yeah, what we're trying to get to is like kind of trying to treat it as a privileged access account, like to the same degree as like we would say a global admin, right? And that, by kind of putting the rule set into a shared mailbox, that's kind of now it becomes our canary, where we can kind of monitor that behavior much more consistently. Like if an end user makes a forwarding rule that, to move mail in their mailbox, we don't necessarily want to trigger off that, but there shouldn't be many use cases for forwarding anything out of that shared mailbox because you all have access to it. And that information gets stayed in that mailbox, and then so it becomes easier to have better quality alerts on that mailbox, for example.
Yeah, and just to pound the point, this is one of the few things in my mind that Microsoft actually makes easy to do right. Like by default, when you create a group mailbox, you have to authorize a specific list of people to access it. Like not everybody can get it. So if you're not on the list, you can't get there. You can't add it as another inbox in Outlook. So to your other point about forwarding from regular users, I would agree in general, except for one use case. In any organization that I can think of, there should be literally no reason why a common end user, even an administrator, should be forwarding all mail to an email address that's outside the company domain. Like that's just a dead giveaway that there's data leakage and data harvesting going on.
The one area that we found that seems to happen is marketing departments working with other companies where they like they'll make a mailbox for essentially like a website that will bring in intake, and then they want it to forward to someone else that's like a consultancy, and then it kind of does that. And so, it happens kind of rarely, but we have found that as a use case, which is kind of interesting. Whenever we run that, when we see a client do that, we require them to sign a waiver, essentially say, hey, your data is leaving your environment. We no longer can attest to the chain of custody after the fact. So yeah, it's a little challenging, but it's weird that we have found that as a use case.
Hopefully you recommended them that maybe that whoever's coding up that website should just have the form go directly to the marketing agency to begin with.
Absolutely.
Right?
But it becomes like a weird thing where like they don't want to buy another domain name, or it's like the consultancy has like a shared, platform where they have like a form submission through their page, and they want to kind of not white label it. And so becomes kind of a weird workflow sometimes where it's like they're kind of pretending to be a different website.
Yeah. But it's amazing
so-
that they could get around that by spending $30, $200, whatever. And,
Yeah.
rather than do that, they've spent $30,000 to build this marketing campaign, but they won't spend $30 to make sure that they've got adequate security on it.
Yeah, it's painful. Like that's the one little thing that drops the security. It's like a $5 to $10 charge a month. Yeah.
Ryan, is there a use case there potentially for like, and we've seen this like with tools like AppGate. Not to make this an AppGate commercial, I'm just going to use that as a name, right? Which is a great conditional access ETNA where you could say that you can only come into this specific folder and see these specific documents. And that's all, so that there would be things wouldn't be leaving necessarily. It would just be collaborative.
Well, the thing that we're trying to think of is delivering the mail more to SharePoint, and then sharing that library with that customer or that user, so that the contents never really leave the organization, and we have an audit trail of who's accessing it using SharePoint's mechanisms. And we're trying to leverage Power Automate and Flow to kind of take that mail into the mailbox and then shift it over to a SharePoint library, and then have that SharePoint library shared with that organization rather than just forwarding it to a mailbox.
Got it.
We've had some successes so far. It's been a matter of like, if the vendor kind of plays ball with us, like it wants to try to make a better experience, then it's working out. But the ones, the challenge is when a web developer is kind of doing this, they tend to not be the best web developer, and so they don't always want to play ball in this way. So
I can't imagine that they have their own minds when it comes to dev side of things, Ryan.
Yeah.
All right, I know we're at the top of the hour. First off, Ben, thank you. That was awesome, and so great to have folks like you and hopefully others, Jason, Joshua, Ryan, participate. The more you guys interact, and thank you guys for making it lively and useful, I think, for everybody, because that's what this is all about, right? This is why we have communities, why we go to events. But you guys are making this happen, so thank you very, very much for that. Anything in closing, Chip, you want to share, and we'll work on our next week's piece of content coming up here. I'll get that out, but anything in closing from you, Chip?
Yeah, look, I think these are great exercises. I'd like to see, the community participation. It's nice to see people's different takes on it. I'm still running Ryan's scenario through my mind, because I've actually never had someone take that approach, or heard of someone trying to take that approach with group mailboxes, and I love it. So I love coming to these calls. I learn stuff new every day, not just about our product, but about ways to use other products, and obviously come with great ideas for SaaS alerts. So I really appreciate all of you guys who participated. And Ben, thanks a million. Really, really appreciate you stepping up. Would love to see, more sharing from the community on other scenarios that they've been through. This is the way we all learn.
Yeah, if you have any, send them on into us, please. Until next week, please register for the webinar. We'd love to see you out there. And on behalf of SaaS Alerts, have an awesome one. We'll see you next Thursday.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks
Thanks, guys.
everybody.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hey, guys.